skip this completely. Then I realized, whoa, our audience members are not all here from the United States. We have a lot of members all across the world. I was like, goodness me, I've made a lot of assumptions. So let me backtrack before I move into my other slide. How things happen in the United States. We have great programs where institutions like Iowa State offer graduate students the opportunity to teach as teaching assistants, and that pays for, that helps them fund their graduate education, right? So Eric and I wouldn't be here if Iowa State didn't accept us way back in 2002. That's how old we are. But so when I say international graduate students that come here and get the offers of teaching assistantships, then they are ITAs, International Teaching Assistants. So I'm going to use this acronym later. And what they do is they have teaching responsibilities within undergraduate courses. And so then that brings up the stakes, right? Because undergraduates pay tuition. If you can't deliver content to undergraduate students, you know, as the university, you could get sued. So we don't want to do that. In Iowa, the Board of Regents, and I'm sure many other states have the same mandate. In Iowa, our Board of Regents actually have a mandate that says, hey, if you have ITAs, you got to make sure that their oral communication proficiency is up to a certain standard. And by that, there must be a way to evaluate, and there must be language support, right? So these two go hand in hand. At Iowa State, the Center for Communication Excellence is tasked to monitor that, right? So the CCE, Center for Communication Excellence, we are within the graduate college, right? And so we provide the institutional tests and we provide the courses. So for the institutional test, you're going to hear this. The OECT stands for Oral English Certification Test. It focuses on oral proficiency, and it focuses on English as English for teaching purposes, right? These two. And then, of course, when we have to focus on these two areas, then we have to prepare the course to focus on English for teaching purposes. So we have this program called the International Teaching Assistance Program, amongst many other programs. But today we're going to look at this. After the ITAs take the OECT, based on their scores, they are then placed into one of these three levels. And the three levels here, we have the courses, level A, B, and C are about the same, intermediate, and then D are the advanced. So they're placed into one of these three courses. And you can see the kind of objectives that we want them to work on, right? Obviously, the lower intermediate have more issues with segmentals and suprasegmentals, and then basic communication skills. But you can see across, way at the bottom, all of them focus on functions. Why? Because there are a lot of language functions that go into teaching purposes, right? And so when I'm going to look at today, I'm only going to look at this left part, this tiny little sliver at the bottom corner. That's about all the time I have, right? You don't want me to go into everything because we don't have time for that. But that's the little thing that we're going to look at. Now, here's our problem. English 188 is the lowest level. If you work with administration, if you work with a budget, you know classes can get canceled if there's low enrollment. Yet, English 180A is the most crucial because these are the students that need the language support the most, correct? They can hardly make a few sentences coherently, fluently. With their segmental issues, they can't convey the ideas. How are they going to reach the part where they're going to lead a recitation? No way, right? And the hiring department want to make sure that they can hire the ITAs to help deliver content. Now, when I say the classes get canceled because of low enrollment, there's a good part of it. that means the number of ITAs that we're admitting actually have a decent level of proficiency that they can get to the intermediate and advanced, right? So that's the good part. But the bad part is when you only have like 3 that need to be in 180 and the minimum course requirement is 8, what's going to happen? We cut the class. What's our option? We try to squeeze them into the next level, which is B or C. They don't always work because they do still need that extra help, right? And if you've looked at a research that deals with oral communication, you might have come across willingness to communicate as a framework. The students who have lower levels of oral proficiency have higher anxiety levels of trying to practice in front of people. Now, you put them in a level that's higher than theirs, they're going to be even more reluctant to practice in class. What's going to happen? They're going to get even further and further behind, right? So that's the first part. That's the issue. The second issue is, now we talked about the OECD, which is the test for ITAs. Unfortunately, that's not the only language test that international graduate students have to take when they arrive at Iowa State. They also have to take a general English placement test, and if they don't get through that, they still have to take additional writing classes or speaking classes, and they still have to meet those classes on top of our classes. So a student in this position is likely to have 2 to 3 English language classes that they must take within the first year. We'll give them time, right? Not the first semester, within the first year. Now, that's not an issue if that was all that they were supposed to take. They also have to take their own classwork. And when they arrive, their advisors in their disciplines have already lined up foundational classes that they must take in order to meet the prerequisites that subsequent semesters they can take other classes. Compounded with the teaching duties that they already have to do. So good part is we fund our graduate students to complete their studies. Bad part is, half the time they're working and then they have to take their own classes. Then they have to do these language classes. So it's not easy, right? So these become often conflicting priorities. Before I show you a solution, right, I want to showcase the fields of studies that we've drawn upon. We talked about computer-assisted language learning or technology for a second language. I use CALL as a bigger umbrella. We also drew upon practices from teacher education, online and distance education, and also curriculum and instructional technology. So our solution is the online version of the face-to-face, but we had to tweak a lot of practices. Now, if you've worked with online educators, they say you don't just convert everything from face-to-face into online and let everything go. It does not work that way. When we started this process, we worked back and forth with a instructional designer, and I myself have that expertise, but still, she was keeping me on task, asking, why are you doing this? Can we do that? What are the goals? What are the objectives? You heard during the colloquium a lot of people talking about this TPAC. This is essentially drilled down to the very last bit. Every decision made has to be supported. Why? Why? How does that lead back to your objective? Okay? So it was a rigorous process. And here are 4 things that I want to showcase. And remember that little sliver, I'm only covering the language function portion, right? So we have a lot. But 4 points that I want to make. Number 1, we made self-paced weekly modules. And why do we make self-paced weekly modules? Conflicting schedules. They need that flexibility to be able to work anytime they want, right? Online, this is the best part about online courses. If they have that flexibility, you want to give it to them. But we don't say, hey, You can do 3 modules all at once, take a break, finish the last 5 at the end of the semester. Or finish all 8 and be done. No. We still want to make sure that their progress is meeting or aligned with other peers that they don't see, right? It goes lockstep. So within the 1 week period, there are tasks that you can do anytime you want. Some of them do it at night. Some of them do it first thing in the morning, whenever. You have that freedom. Number 2, you have learn, you have practice, you have tests. These are 3 elements that must be consistent and is based on best practices in online education. You have to have consistency. And then you draw in call. You have to have input. Then you have to have output, right? And somewhere there, because this is oral communication, you can't just every time just receive a one direction feedback. There must be synchronous activities. Now wait, I just said this is an online course that's self-paced. They don't see their peers. They don't engage with their peers. So where does the synchronous come from? We built in synchronous activities with 2 experts. Number 1, they're instructors. And number 2, this is what I'm going to introduce later, the concept of using what we have at the CCE called Trained English Speaking Consultants. These are graduate students who have been trained to give feedback. So we move on to number 3, which is the interactions. Like I said, you have purposeful interactions with the instructor and then the consultants, and then also built into the weekly tasks. Sometimes we say, hey, go find somebody of your choice, student agency, right? Find somebody of your choice, how comfortable you are, do this task. It could be a peer, it could be a housemate, it could be a volunteer, it could be a stranger. You know, wherever you are in your progress, go do that. Feedback, we always have to have feedback, right? So the feedback is from the tasks, which is the recorded weekly assignments that they upload. And I will say those are more formative than summative, okay? And then during the conferences with the instructors, they actually get a chance to discuss individualized plans. So at this level, every student has different issues, right? So especially with the segmentals and super segmentals, that's when they have further customization in their feedback. And they work with the instructor on that. And then obviously the consultants also give feedback. I'll move to theory now. We used, not we, I was like my boss, built this based off Mohan's framework, knowledge framework, but then Cotos and Chung in 2018 and 2019 went in and looked at the use of functional language in content area instruction, and they expanded this framework, right? So on the left side, you see the knowledge structure. Those are the 6 key structures that appear in labs, recitations, lectures. And then on the right, they drill down to the specific functions, okay? And I'll point out, obviously, from top to bottom, description to choice, there's a complexity involved in the levels of functions and knowledge structure. So this is what we looked at. There is research from 2019 looked at 3 disciplines, chemistry, physics, and English. And you can see in the red box there, very common structures are description, principles, and sequence. Now go back, you can see those language functions that are related to those 3 knowledge structures. So we want to focus on those primarily at the very first level and also recurring, right, throughout all 3 levels. But as you go to the right 2 structures, obviously those are going to be more focused on in the advanced levels of English 180. Technological affordances, you obviously need a learning management system. Iowa State is using Canvas, so that's where we go. Technology has also given us the ability to record audio and video, It's so easy these days. You can even do it on a phone, upload it to Canvas. Everything is built in. If not, go to a cloud-based, record it, upload it. It's very easy. WebEx or Zoom, that's the two-way audio-visual synchronous technology that supports the interaction between instructor and student or consultant and student. And we did this pre-COVID, so we were ahead of the game, right? So we knew this, and in fact, the bottom part is an example, a PowerPoint that the students have to create as part of their assignments. It's one PowerPoint page, or no, not one, a few slides, but then they have to talk through this presentation as if they were presenting it in class. But we started teaching them things like how you present online, and we were ahead of the game. We were so pleased. So topics, right? So I'm saying this is the car that brings the language functions. This is a car that brings the people. The topics have to be matching the ITA's or proficiency level. You imagine these are the people that first come on campus. If you're going to ask them about climate changes, the language, the vocabulary is way too complex, right? So we start off with the topics that are the easiest for them. We talk about shapes, we talk about weather, family, general things. But there's a double purpose, right? Because these are also cultural things that they can talk about, that most people want to talk to them about, right? So the first semester, second semester, these are all of the topics that we talk about. And we built in, so you can see we start with describing, we go to sequencing, and then towards the end where they start talking about technical concepts already, we are building in the higher order knowledge structures. I'm going to move on to the examples of synchronous tasks. Like I said before, every week we have learn, practice, and then we have tests, right? And the benefits are we provide flexibility, we include multimodal resources, best part about technology. And here it's important that you're allowing them the amount of time they need to practice in their perceived sense, right? If I come through this topic and I say, this function, I'm pretty comfortable with it, so I can whiz through this module. If the next module I'm like, boy, this is a topic that's kind of harder for me, I can keep practicing by myself until I'm comfortable. 5 times, 10 times, whatever. And when I'm ready, I can record it once. No, not good enough. Twice, 3 times. Okay, I will upload that. And that's the one that the instructor gets, the one that the instructor gives feedback. Consistent pattern, this is, again, like I said, important design because of online delivery. Here's an example. We'll talk about practice. We provide them information. We explain why it's important. Small talk is essential for international graduate students because many cultures do not have small talk. They don't know how to make small talk. A student of mine will say, well, somebody will say, hey, how are you doing today? And I want to start talking, but they are not interested. So why did they ask me? They get mad. They really do get mad. It's like, well, how am I supposed to respond? So we have to actually tell them the rationale about why do you want to talk about weather? Well, everything is about weather. Today is super cold, but it's not winter. Well, tomorrow is summer again. What's going on? So we give them this concept, but then we also give them the resources where they practice. You have videos that demonstrate why and how. We give them the language, the vocabulary, and they can use this and practice as much as they want. Then we have that structured assignment, right? So sometimes we give them something very specific. They do a recording, they practice, and then they upload it. After a few weeks, they have built up a few topics, right, and a few functions. Then we assign them something cumulative, right? For example, this is a task that could come in the OECD, right? And so then we expect them to work through these functions. Examples of the synchronous, like I said, they have 2 main ones. They interact with the consultants, and then they interact with the instructor. Real-time practice, feedback opportunities. Now, this is important. We discovered that when students work with the consultants, and the consultants are also asked to give feedback, they're trained to give feedback, the students start saying, wait a minute, my instructor said the same thing about my lack of blah, right? They start paying attention. It's not just my instructor's picking on me. I actually do have a lack in this area. And they really start paying attention and say, okay, I want to see this. I want to do more. And then during the synchronous tasks, like I said, we have the customized supplementary learning activities. Here's an example of the task. You'll see this is cumulative after 4 weeks of working on different topics and different functions. It's very structured. We want them to practice everything that they've learned in 3 or 4 weeks. The consultants get the exact same task. They are supposed to be role-playing as a participant, right? Not the consultant yet. But then they are later asked to give feedback in these areas. So it's very structured, very carefully structured. You'll see at the bottom of that we have pronunciation areas. Again, those are also built in every week. I'm not talking about that. I'm only focusing on language functions. But it does come into the feedback. So, questions?
I'll bring you the mic.
So do you use this course only when 180A is canceled, or do you use it, has this totally replaced it, or what? How does that work?
Great question. So, I think we used it once where we had about 4 students. So I could at least assign a consultant to be that, take over as a formal class, right? We can make it as 4. Then not long ago, we had 1. We had 1 student. I was like, I can't open a class just for 1 student. So unofficially, we had this trained English-speaking consultant use the same material, but schedule a weekly meeting. So this student had to come and do weekly appointments, but then they were able to utilize the materials here and then just move on track to meet all the functions and all the other segmentals and super segmentals. So that's the nice part, is that now we have that, it's more flexible and it can be used in different ways. There's some online questions.
Okay, the online question is, are the consultations face-to-face or virtual? If virtual, synchronous or asynchronous?
Very good question. So when we first piloted this, even though this was an online course, the students are on campus. So we say, it's up to you. Our instructor had an office space, and our English-speaking consultants have an office space. So we told the students, you can come in person or you can schedule it via Zoom or WebEx. So it was up to them. Some of them still preferred, this was pre-COVID when we piloted it, some of them really did prefer that one-on-one, right, in person. But post-COVID, everybody's now more comfortable. You know, it saves them time to run across campus. We have both, and it is entirely up to the student and the consultant, the student and the instructor.
Any other questions?
So, I mean, you mentioned self-paced, the self-pacingness of the course, but with all of the other elements included, I mean, did you have kind of a time limit that you were?
Everything is within 1 week.
Nobody, I mean, like hours per week for a student to do everything.
No. So like I said before, at this level, you know, everybody's got different progress, different time commitment. We allow them, as long as they feel like they've mastered it, they can just do it quickly and get done. then they get the feedback, right? The instructor is going to say, well, Eric, I think you still need to work on this. And that comes out during the one-on-one with the instructor after 2 or 3 weeks that they accumulated. And then so I'm going to say, hey, Eric, you do a great job with all these things, but here are some of the other things that I would like you to work on. And typically, those things that come up deal with segmentals. And that's the best time to say, hey, your particular interference from L1 is this. I'm going to give you some resources. Let's practice here a little bit. You take this home, and then you do more. If you want to email that to me, fine. If not, I've told you what you need to work on, and then those things come up again and again, so then they know.
There's a compilation of resources that's ready-made for the consultant. You can talk about that.
Oh, yes. And so our consultants actually do have a set resource where they can just pull up and assign those things, the instructor as well. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just with having taught online, what is kind of the learning curve for some of the students coming in for this kind of learning situation for language learning? I mean, I'm assuming that quite a few students probably have some experience, but there's probably some that don't. So what do you kind of see as that learning curve?
Yes. So we, in our very first module, so we did this, like I said, I have a very, very experienced instructional designer. And they have the same format with every course that they help us develop. The first module is orientation towards this online platform. The expectations, they made us spell out everything. They have a test audio, test upload, those kind of things within the first week. So we ease them in, and then there is the Iowa State Canvas support as well. So I think that essentially it's simple enough because it's a matter of recording, uploading, and that's all they need to do. So far, I think the learning curve is pretty low on this, even for pre-pandemic. But yes, instructional design-wise, I think it's very important to build that orientation in.
No other questions? Okay. Thank you.
I want a chance to use this anymore. There you go.